GOP is repeating what the New York Times calls a new and misleading talking point, that Democrats are shutting down the government to fund free health care for unauthorized immigrants. The false assertion, has been repeated by Vice President J.D. Vance and Speaker Mike Johnson, along with the president himself. Here's what is important to note. Undocumented immigrants have long been prohibited from taxpayer-funded Medicaid coverage, except for treatment in emergency medical situations. They also do not qualify for Medicaid and Medicare. The fight on Capitol Hill is over reimbursements that allow hospitals to recoup the costs of emergency care in certain cases. The president's massive spending bill had limited those federal dollars, which is what Republicans are looking to keep in place. As CNBC reports, Democrats say they are only trying to restore health care coverage options that were available to some immigrants before those options were eliminated by President Trump's so-called one big, beautiful tax bill this year. Steve Ratner, can you add to that and talk about the economic impact of this shutdown?
Yeah, Mika, this is completely misleading on the part of the Republicans. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, this provision's been around for 4 years, and I don't recall anybody talking about how there was waste, fraud, and abuse. That's the Republican favorite talking point, of course. Yeah. When they want to attack a program, they say it's all waste, fraud, and abuse. This is just subsidies for normal health care for normal Americans who are further down in the economic ladder to make health care affordable when they buy it on the ACA exchanges. That is the core of the fight. The Democrats have asked for some other stuff, but obviously there's a negotiation, and probably most of that won't happen. This is at the core of it. Essentially, let me just step back and put this also in perspective. In the first term, Trump talked all the time about overturning Obamacare, repealing Obamacare, and then famously John McCain voted against it. It stayed in place. You have not heard the Republicans talk about repealing Obamacare for a long time, but that is what they are doing. In the one big beautiful bill, there are a bunch of changes in Medicaid, and then you have this provision that
go ahead, keep going.
And there was this provision that did not get expired. And when you add it all up, all the stuff they've done in about one big beautiful bill plus this would reduce the number of Americans who got health care under Obamacare by 70%. It would effectively unwind 70% of Obamacare in this very stealth way without ever saying that's what they're doing.
And is this also the cuts that some of them come after the midterms?
Yes, the Medicaid cuts. So
people don't feel them until after the midterms.
The Medicaid cuts come after the midterms. But for something like 20 million Americans who are buying their insurance through the exchanges, which is what this fight is about, when you go out and buy in exchanges, you're going to feel it right away. The health insurance companies have already filed their premiums for next year, and the average premium increase will be 18%. Because of this expiration of this provision. So even the ones who still don't get subsidies, still buy in the exchanges, are going to see much higher premiums right away, not after the midterms.
And we should underline again, Brez, there's a federal law that says people here without legal status cannot get taxpayer money for health care under Medicaid.
Is that the main issue here, or is there more going on?
Well, of course, this is about policy, but it's also about politics, as is most things on Capitol Hill. For Democrats, they want to extend the Obamacare subsidies, which expire at the end of this year. But they're also under enormous pressure from their own base to stand up to Trump, especially after Schumer and Senate Democrats caved in March over that spring funding battle. And for Republicans, there's politics as well. They're standing by Trump. They feel like they have the upper hand at this moment. But it really is a messaging war at this moment in time. That's why you saw Republicans have that really splashy press conference outside the Capitol in a place we don't normally have press conferences. It's just this gorgeous backdrop. You could see the National Mall. They have signs. Johnson talked about how the fact that they're going to roll out a video clip. He actually has a TV screen literally outside his office right now playing clips of Democrats just to give you a sense of how both sides are really trying to win the argument and win the messaging war. But, Joe, it's interesting how you pointed out that Republicans did not mention health care until they were asked about it. And in fact, there was a GOP conference call this week, and I'm told, according to sources on that call, that the leadership's advice to their own members was to not talk about health care because they fear that that is a losing message for Republicans. And instead, the leadership counseled their members to really try to talk about the economic consequences of a shutdown and pin the blame squarely on Democrats. So that's where we are at this moment in time, the first day of a government shutdown. Neither side is talking. They're having dueling press conferences here on Capitol Hill, with Democrats slated to have their own press conference any moment here, also on Capitol Hill. And there's no plans for meetings. And Trump, again, continues to post these rather bigoted AI-generated videos about Democrats in a sign that perhaps no deal is imminent, at least at this very moment, Joe.
I do want to talk about the impact of this shutdown. 750,000 employees furloughed, with the president threatening some could even be fired during all this. Others with essential jobs, TSA agents, air traffic controllers, they're going to have to work without pay. National parks, they're partially open. Medicare security, Social Security benefits, those are unchanged. But notably, as we just heard a few Republicans note, 3 Democrats did vote for this resolution last night. Republicans do at least seem to be projecting some confidence. They would need 5 more Democrats. Are there cracks here? Could 5 more Democrats decide to vote yes, which means Democrats walk away with nothing?
That is their hope, at least among Republicans, is that they saw that vote last night where 3 Democrats did vote for the GOP stopgap spending bill as a sign that there are cracks in the Democratic Party and that the pressure is only going to continue to build, and that ultimately they're going to be able to peel off 5 additional Democrats, that's what they need in order to pass this bill. But on the Democratic side, they're hopeful that Trump will actually start to get skittish, especially if he sees polls, if he sees, bad headlines about what's happening around the country, as we start to feel the impacts, as TSA lines start to get super long at airports when people are trying to travel, as people are struggling to sign up for Social Security, that he will ultimately try to cut a deal with Democrats on health care. That is something that, according to Democratic leaders, he did signal some interest in. He was apparently alarmed to learn that if they don't act by November 1st, that these Obamacare subsidies expiring are going to cause premiums and health care costs to skyrocket around the country, which could be a problem for Trump and Republicans. So it's unclear which side is going to blink first. At this point, no signs that either side is.
Chuck Schumer saying that the American people are with Democrats when it comes to opposing Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill. But where are Americans in terms of how they feel about this shutdown right now? CNN's Harry Anton is running the numbers on this. What are you seeing?
Yeah, what are we seeing? This is an American public that more so than ever before, I've looked at the polling, is willing to go to a shutdown. What are we talking about here? Well, let's take a look. What Americans wanted pre-shutdown? Well, traditionally speaking, I got the 2013 numbers. The majority of Americans want compromise, no shutdown. You go back to 2013, just 33% said stand on principle, even if it means a shutdown. Come to this side of the screen, we see an even split, right? 50% of Americans say they want a compromise, no shutdown. But up like a rocket, standing on principle, we see now 49%, basically an even split on Americans either wanting a shutdown or, in fact, saying they want their side to stand on principle. I think we're hearing a lot of that from Chuck Schumer.
Which group has shifted the most in terms of compromise or not?
You know, it was so interesting to hear those clips of Chuck Schumer being played back from 2013, from all those past shutdowns.
And just from March, right?
Right, potential shutdowns. And what has changed significantly is Republicans have always been willing to basically say, you know, we should shut down the government and stand on principle. But now Democrats, a significantly larger portion of Democrats say, you know what, let's stand on principle. What Democrats want to pre-shut down? You go back to 2013, just 18% of Democrats said stand on principle. The vast majority, 76%, 3 in 4 Democrats said compromise, no shutdown. Look at this side of the screen. Look at this percentage that said stand on principle back in 2013. It was 18%. Now it's 47%, more than double. In fact, nearly triple the percentage of Democrats now say stand on principle as compared to 2013. We see a much more even split among Democrats. The 52% who say compromise, no shutdown, the 47% who say stand on principle, within the margin of error of each other. What we're seeing is a Democratic Party that is much more so than ever before saying, you know what, let's shut down the government, even if it means no compromise, so that we can stand on principle.
A big question now that it is shut down is how long is this going to last? We keep making the comparison to the longest shutdown, which was in 2018. What What's your reference point on how long you would say it is going to last?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. You look at these numbers, right? You see that 18 to 47%.
Right.
You see this 33% to 49% stand on principle, and you hit at it, Kate Baldwin. The longest shutdown on record was 35 days back in 2018 to 2019, and we're seeing now a Democratic Party that's much more likely to dig in, and you have that Republican Party that has pretty much always been over the last decade very likely to dig in. I think this is a pretty good reference point. I wouldn't be surprised if we reach this record or go even further. Of course, time will tell.
Yes, it will. Thank you so much, Harry. Really appreciate it.
After the midterms.
And we should underline again, Brez, there's a federal law that says people here without legal status cannot get taxpayer money for health care under Medicaid, Medicare, or the ACA. It's against federal law, and Democrats say they have no plans to change that. They don't know where this made-up talking point is coming from. But let's talk about Leader Schumer and the bind he kind of finds himself in. A lot of pressure from his left over the last several years that he gives in too easily to Republicans. What is his position this morning?
I mean, there were, as Thune and Schumer talked about, there were a couple of votes yesterday in the Senate. He lost 3 Democrats, Senate Democrats. They voted, including John Fetterman was one of them, and he lost Angus King, and he lost Catherine Cortez Matasza from Nevada. So he lost that. The thought is, if the Republicans just keep pressuring the moderate Democrats, they'll eventually get them to yield. Schumer, now he's not up till 2028. He's been leader for 8 years now. He's, as you noted, there was a lot of people upset with him for March. That Hakeem Jeffries and the House Democrats, and even Patty Murray, is top Senate appropriator, Democratic appropriator, wanted to vote against the funding bill in March, have this fight in March. Schumer postponed it till later in the year. Part of the thing that doesn't get talked about is how Democrats come in the year thinking there were some pressure points they could get on. Government funding was one of them. The debt limit was another. But surprisingly, Trump leaned on all the Republicans, and even the House Freedom Caucus, even the conservatives voted to increase the debt limit. These guys had never voted for it. So they lost that pressure point. This is one of the pressure points that he has, is government funding, and he has to keep them together. It's a difficult spot he's in. Democrats traditionally don't like shutdowns, and Republicans have been using that against them. And now they're having to vote in a way that causes a shutdown. So this is a tough spot for Schumer. Yeah. As you guys noted, the left, the progressives, really want this fight right now. This is a huge issue. And
what you are seeing right now is not a budget dispute. It's Republicans reviving an old playbook. Manufacture a crisis, push a false claim, provably false, and then demand that Democrats surrender to everything they want. They say the shutdown is about Democrats giving free healthcare to undocumented immigrants. That's not true. Federal law is clear. People without legal status can't get Medicaid. They can't get Medicare. They can't get subsidies under the Affordable Care Act. But does that matter? Of course not. The only exception to that is emergency care, which they deserve anyway, and that's been the rule for decades. So, what's this really about? Hospital reimbursements. Trump's tax bill quietly stripped them. Democrats are now trying to restore them. Republicans want the cuts to stay. They're not admitting that this fight is about undermining Obamacare, but that's basically exactly what's happening. If Republicans succeed, analysts say that it'll unwind 70% of the Affordable Care Act. They failed to repeal it outright, so now they're gutting it piece by piece. Understand the politics here. Democrats are under pressure not to cave again after folding in March. They're trying to extend Obamacare subsidies that expire this year. Thanks, Republicans. Republicans, meanwhile, are staging spectacles and trying to push back against millions of Americans having their health care and keeping the government open. Speaker Johnson held a press event on the Capitol steps with signs and video screens looping Democratic sound bites as if that means anything. But behind closed doors, Republican leaders are telling their own members to stop talking about healthcare. They know it's a losing message. Instead, they want the story to be about the economy, about TSA agents and air traffic controllers forced to work without pay as if they're not the ones causing it, about parks closing and families being disrupted. and about premiums that are already set to rise 18% if subsidies expire. They want voters angry at Democrats, not looking too closely at the fine print of Trump's tax bill. But here's the risk. A few Democrats did vote with Republicans on the stopgap bill. That's fueled GOP hopes that they can peel away even more. Yet Democrats are betting that once the public feels the shutdown, there will be even longer airport lines, delays at Social Security offices, higher healthcare costs, and the blame will shift back to Trump, where it should be. And the cost is real. Millions of Americans facing higher premiums and lost coverage. Lives are at stake. Some people can't afford that. All so Republicans can claim victory in a fight that they couldn't win openly by just stripping our healthcare away from us before our eyes. They have to do it behind secret doors and then blame Democrats for it.